Okay, you guys, tonight we step into the extravagant world of Versailles, the court where the dazzling Louis XIV once ruled, setting the stage for some of the most curious fashion trends history has ever seen. Among these, one trend stands out like strange, invisible crown, the rise of the invisible hat. Now, you're probably wondering, how could something invisible become a symbol of such high fashion? Well, let me take you there. It's not just any regular hat. This one doesn't even exist. At least not in the way you think. Imagine yourself walking through the opulent halls of the palace, the grand mirrors reflecting your every move, the scent of roses mingling with a faint trace of lavender. The court, there, is a swirl of silk, lace, and jewels. But there's something even more eye-catching than the bright colors and gilded accessories, the growing trend of invisible hats. At first, it sounds absurd, doesn't it? A hat you can't see, yet somehow, it's all anyone can talk about. But that's Versailles, for you, a place where nothing makes sense, but everything is taken seriously. The more extravagant, the better. The invisible hat is the ultimate symbol of status. A statement that says, I'm so powerful, so fashionable, that I don't need to show you my accessories. You should just know I have them. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Cuckoo. It's always fascinating to see how far and wide these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. As you step deeper into the court's high society circles, you begin to notice the subtle but significant shift in fashion. The noblemen and women of the court, dripping in gold silks and elaborate gowns, are no longer wearing hats for their practical purposes. No, these hats, invisible as they may be, are now the pinnacle of what's considered in style. It's as if you've walked into a room full of magicians, each one wearing a cloak of invisibility, except their magic is in the form of these unseeable headpieces. This bizarre trend begins to take hold of the court like wildfire. At first, it was just a handful of brave souls, eccentrics, who had too much power and too little sense. But soon, even the most conservative courtiers begin adopting the trend. You overhear conversations about who's wearing the most extravagant invisible hat, and how the mere idea of wearing one makes you part of the elite. It's no longer just about what you wear. It's about what others think you're wearing. And in this world, perception is power. Historians still debate whether the trend began as an avant-garde statement, or as a subtle commentary on the excesses of the aristocracy. Some believe it was a way for the courtiers to mock their own lavish lifestyles. Why wear a visible hat when you could claim to be so rich and powerful that you don't need to prove anything? Others argue that the invisible hat represented an even deeper desire for status, a quest to be noticed while simultaneously remaining out of sight, a kind of reverse vanity that made it all the more attractive. For you, walking through the courts of Versailles, the invisible hats are both a symbol of power and a joke at the expense of the very people who wear them. The absurdity doesn't escape you, and yet, you can't help but wonder if you might be the one missing out. Everyone around you is sporting these invisible pieces, and there's a strange pressure to conform. You can't help but feel the tug of curiosity. What's the real appeal here? With each passing day, you see more courtiers adopting this invisible trend, and before long, it's no longer just about hats. The invisible fashion statement expands now. Invisible shoes, invisible gloves, even invisible cloaks. It's a social experiment that transcends practicality, becoming something that could only exist in a world as fantastical and unpredictable as Versailles. But the question remains, what drives this peculiar trend? Is it a reflection of the excess and absurdity of court life? Or is there something deeper at play here? You start to think that perhaps it's not just about the clothes. Perhaps it's about the idea of power, of being so high up in the social order that you don't need to show anyone what you have. Maybe the invisible hat is, in the end, just the beginning of something much more profound. As the invisible hat craze takes over Versailles, you're starting to realize that it's more than just a strange fashion statement. It's a statement about power, control, and the court's constant need to outdo each other. The more you observe, the more you understand that this trend is not just a fleeting whim. No, it's a calculated move, a game in which the courtiers are competing for status, influence, and above all, attention. But the catch: you can't see any of it. It's like playing poker with your cards face down, each player trying to bluff their way to victory. Now, imagine yourself at a grand ball in the Hall of Mirrors, the entire court of Versailles arrayed. Before you, the chandeliers glow, casting a soft shimmer over their silks and satins. The invisible hats are everywhere, floating above heads, tantalizingly out of sight. Some are larger, more intricate, while others are barely a whisper of thought yet. All are deemed equally prestigious. Courtier, a particularly well-known figure, adjusting what appears to be an impossibly elaborate, invisible creation. And you can't help but wonder if there's some kind of secret message being communicated. Is it just about status, or is there a deeper layer to the puzzle that you're missing? Historians still debate whether the invisible hat was intended as a form of social commentary or a mere fashion folly. Some scholars argue that it's a metaphor for the absolute power of Louis XIV himself, the Sun King, who governed with such absolute control that even the laws of visibility could be bent to his will. Others see it as a subversive gesture, ironic counterpoint to the excessive displays of wealth and power. Perhaps it's a silent rebellion against the ever-watchful eyes of the king, a way to play at being above the system without actually challenging it. But no matter what the historians say, you can feel the atmosphere shift as the trend takes hold. There's a sense of mystery that surrounds the invisible hats. They're not just accessories. They've become symbols of something larger, something harder to pin down. You start to hear whispers that the hats are more than just a way to make a fashion statement. They're a way to communicate one's place in the social hierarchy without saying a word. The invisible hats aren't just accessories. They're the embodiment of the court's obsession with prestige. There's also something strangely empowering about these invisible items. You can walk into a room full of courtiers, your head adorned with something no one can see, and still command attention. It's almost as if the invisible nature of the hat allows you to blend in while simultaneously standing out. You've become part of an exclusive club, one where power is not given by what you show, but by what you can hide. The invisible hat is a perfect metaphor for this paradox, hiding in plain sight. As you begin to get caught up in the allure of this new trend, you start to notice the peculiar social dynamics at play. The courtiers, who wear the most elaborate invisible hats, are the ones who seem to dominate every conversation, every gathering. They move through the court with an air of unspoken authority, as if the invisible hats have given them the ability to control the very fabric of Versailles itself. And then there's the competition, each person vying to outdo the other in terms of their invisible headwear, to create the most impressive, most mysterious look. Some even claim that these hats have magical properties. Of course, no one can confirm this, but you can't deny the air of mystery surrounding them. The paradox of the invisible hat is that it gives the wearer the power to remain unseen while simultaneously asserting their presence. You start to wonder, how far does this trend go? Can you truly control your fate in the court by simply donning an invisible hat, or is it all just an elaborate game of smoke and mirrors? But as the days pass, something more strange begins to unfold. The invisible hat trend isn't just a sign of power. It becomes a form of psychological warfare. So you notice the subtle shifts in behavior as you move through the court. The courtiers who wear their invisible hats with the most confidence seem to have the most influence. Those who are unsure, who fumble with their invisible headpieces or wear them half-heartedly, find themselves slipping into the background. It's a social game where perception is everything, and the invisible hat has become the ultimate weapon. You begin to feel the weight of this new fashion, not just in the expectations it places on you, but in the way it forces you to reconsider your own position in the court. The invisible hat doesn't just give you access to the elite circle of Versailles, demands that you play by its rules. The question is, are you ready to embrace it, or will you remain an outsider to this strange, invisible world? The longer you stay in Versailles, the more the invisible hat becomes an obsession. What began as a peculiar fashion trend has now turned into an intricate web of power dynamics and social maneuvering. It's like the entire court is in on a game where the rules are constantly shifting, and the invisible hats are the ultimate currency. They're not just hats anymore, they're status symbols, social tools, and even weapons of psychological warfare. One afternoon, as you wander through the sprawling gardens of Versailles, you find yourself deep in thought about this strange phenomenon. The sun shines brightly, casting long shadows over the perfectly manicured hedges. But your mind is elsewhere on the court, and the increasingly odd spectacle of invisible hats. You've watched enough to know that the trend is now a matter of personal pride. The more extravagant the hat, the greater the status, and the more attention it commands. The courtiers are no longer just wearing hats, they're performing. Every move, every glance, every gesture seems designed to emphasize their invisible headgear. But as you observe the situation, you can't help but notice something more troubling. Despite all the extravagant displays, there's a sense of emptiness surrounding the invisible hats. No one can see them, and yet everyone is desperate to outdo each other. There's an eerie quietness that permeates the court. a strange undercurrent of tension as people try to one-up each other in this invisible race. The invisible hats may be creating status, but they're also revealing something darker, something that has less to do with fashion and more to do with the fragility of power itself. Historians, as always, remain divided on the purpose of the invisible hats. Some suggest that they were an ironic commentary on the excess of the court. If you could hide something as ostentatious as a hat, it would be a way to mock the superficiality of the aristocracy's obsession with outward displays of wealth. Others argue that it was a statement of power, an assertion that one could achieve prestige even without the need for tangible symbols. Still, others believe the invisible hats were a reflection of the increasing paranoia at court, where everything and everyone seemed to be hiding something. The more visible the hat, the less likely you were to be trusted, but you can't deny the appeal. You're slowly becoming one of them, one of the courtiers who wears an invisible hat with such confidence that it seems to radiate a kind of undeniable power. You start to walk differently, your posture straighter, your gaze sharper, as if your invisible hat gives you the ability to command the space around you. You've fallen into the strange allure of the invisible fashion, and soon you realize, that you're not just playing along. You've become a player in this high-stakes game of power and perception. The paradox of the invisible hat is clear now. On one hand, it allows you to hide, to remain anonymous, to slip under the radar in a world that demands constant attention. But, on the other hand, it gives you the ultimate visibility. You're not just another courtier in a crowd, you're someone who commands attention without even trying. It's as if the invisible hat has given you a secret power, one that only those in the know can understand. As you begin to embrace this power, you notice the dynamics of the court shifting around you. The invisible hats have become so prevalent that they've started to affect not just individual relationships, but the entire social structure of Versailles. The once rigid hierarchy is now more fluid, with those who wear the most extravagant, invisible hats ascending to positions of power. Some say it's a form of social Darwinism, survival of the most fashionably elusive. You begin to wonder if this is how the court always worked. A constant battle for dominance, disguised as fashion and frivolity. But the most interesting part of all this is the realization that no one, not even the king himself, is safe from the invisible trend. The Sun King, the one who built this magnificent palace, the one who reveled in the grandeur of his court, is now part of this strange spectacle. His own invisible hat, an elaborate creation said to symbolize his unparalleled power, becomes the subject of whispered conversations and envious stares. You start to wonder, does he truly control the court? Or is he just another player in this game, subject to the same invisible forces that govern the rest of the courtiers? The deeper you delve into the world of invisible fashion, the more you begin to question the true meaning of visibility. What does it mean to be seen, to be powerful, to be significant in a world where everything can be hidden in plain sight? The invisible hats are no longer just a trend, they're a lens through which the Court of Versailles is revealed in all its complex, contradictory glory. As the invisible hat trend flourishes, the Court of Versailles becomes an ever more curious place. The extravagant spectacle of court life, once centered around ostentatious displays of wealth and grandeur, is now shifting into something far more elusive. Cut. You begin to realize that in this world of hidden hats, there's a deeper play at hand, one that's not just about fashion, but about perception, manipulation, and, above all, the ability to control the way others see you. One day, as you stroll through the grand halls of Versailles, you catch sight of a familiar face, an aristocrat, known for his calculated, almost sinister approach to power. He's adjusting his invisible hat with an air of exaggerated nonchalance, as though he's done this 1,000 times before. You can almost see the satisfaction on his face, a gleam in his eye, as he realizes the effect his invisible headgear has on those around him. His movements are slow, deliberate, almost theatrical, designed to draw attention without appearing to seek it. It's a delicate balance, one that he's perfected with a masterful hand. But it's not just about the invisible hats themselves, it's about what they represent. This aristocrat's confidence is the key. The more imperceptible the hat, the greater the suggestion of power. The invisible hat, with its mysterious and intangible quality, suggests that the wearer is above the mundane concerns of visibility and outward presentation. Q. Begin to understand that the invisible hat is, in essence, a form of control. The less you reveal, the more you command. The less people can see, the more they crave to understand. Historians still debate whether the trend of invisible hats was purely a fashion statement, or if there was a deeper, more subtle form of psychological manipulation at play. Some scholars argue that the invisible hats were a reflection of the growing paranoia of the time. With constant power struggles and political intrigues swirling around the court, no one could ever truly be sure of who held the true power. The invisible hat, they claim, was a way of hiding one's true intentions, playing on the natural human desire to uncover what is hidden. Others suggest that the hats were symbolic of the absolute power of the monarchy. If Louis XIV could wear an invisible hat, it would mean that no one could challenge his authority, even if they couldn't see the symbol of his reign. Regardless of the scholars' perspectives, one thing is certain: the invisible hats have become the key to understanding the unspoken rules of Versailles. Power is not about what you can see, but what you can conceal. The more invisible you become, the more influential you are. As you observe the courtiers, you notice how they move differently now. There's a subtle shift in the way they interact with each other. They no longer flaunt their wealth with excessive displays of jewels or extravagant gowns. Instead, they move with quiet confidence, as if the invisible hat has given them a new sense of self-assurance. You begin to wonder if this is what true power looks like, unseen, unfelt, but undeniably present. The invisible hat allows them to hold court without ever appearing to try pits, as if they've mastered the art of being both everywhere and nowhere at once. As the trend grows, it becomes clear that the invisible hats are more than just a fashion statement. They've become a form of social currency, a way to gain access to the highest echelons of Versailles society. It's no longer enough to simply be rich or powerful. To truly succeed in the court of Louis XIV, one must be able to wear the invisible hat with the utmost grace and poise. It's a game, and only the most skilled players can navigate it without falling into the background. But then something even stranger begins to happen. The invisible hats, once a symbol of sophistication, begin to take on a life of their own. They become a kind of obsession, a mysterious force that governs the lives of the courtiers. They start to change their behavior, in subtle ways, becoming more focused on what they can hide than what they can reveal. It's as if the invisible hats are eroding the very fabric of Versailles' once visible aristocracy, replacing it with something far more intangible, yet far more dangerous. The more you watch, the more you realize that the invisible hat is not just a symbol of powerites, a reflection of the court's own internal fragility. Courtiers are no longer interested in projecting an image of strength. Instead, they've become obsessed with maintaining an air of mystery, of control. And in this world of invisible headwear, the line between power and paranoia begins to blur. The more invisible they become, the more fragile they seem. It's a precarious balancing act, and you can't help but wonder how long it will last before the delicate facade cracks. Still, despite the ever-present tension, you can't help but be drawn to the invisible hats. You find yourself contemplating the paradox they represent. On the one hand, they are a symbol of ultimate power, the ability to control the court through mere suggestion. On the other, they are a symbol of vulnerability, because, in the end, the more invisible you are, the less you can be seen, the less you truly exist. And that's the real danger. The more you wear the invisible hat, the more you risk fading into obscurity. As the invisible hats continue to spread like wildfire through the Court of Versailles, you can't help but notice the strange shift in the atmosphere around you. The once lavish and ostentatious displays of wealth have now been replaced by something subtler, more elusive. What was once a royal court, bursting with extravagance and ornamentation, is now a place where the unseen carries as much weight as the visible. The invisible hats, with their growing influence, have begun to fundamentally alter the very nature of power within the palace. You find yourself spending more time observing the courtiers, their movements, their conversations, their subtle gestures. It's as though the invisible hat has redefined the way they interact with one another. The haughty arrogance of the aristocracy is still present, but now it's tempered with an air of mystery, as if they're all playing a game with unseen stakes. It's a game where the rules are constantly shifting, and the invisible hats have become the ultimate prize. But something else begins to creep into your thoughts, the realization that this invisible fashion trend may not be entirely about power. After all, while the courtiers may wear their invisible hats as symbols of prestige, you start to suspect that something deeper is at play. As the invisible hats become more common, you begin to notice a subtle undercurrent of tension. There's a constant need to be seen as part of this new elite group, to wear the hat with the perfect balance of confidence and humility. You wonder if the invisible hats have become more of a social trap, a way for the courtiers to keep one another in check. Historians still argue about the true purpose of the invisible hats, whether they were simply a playful, absurd trend, or if they were a deliberate commentary on the nature of power and perception. Some believe that the invisible hats were a way to mock the very idea of aristocratic grandeur, a reminder that even the most visible of positions could be rendered invisible in a single moment. Others suggest that the hats were a way to elevate the wearer above the common folk, offering a subtle form of superiority that wasn't reliant on wealth or display. But one thing is certain: the invisible hats have introduced an entirely new way of understanding status and authority, one that relies not on what you show the world, but on what you choose to hide. You're beginning to feel the weight of the invisible hat on your own shoulders. The more you wear it, the more you begin to see just how much it changes the way people treat you. At first, it was just a curious fashion statement, something that allowed you to participate in the court's extravagant game. But now, you realize that it's more than that. The invisible hat has become a tool, a weapon, a subtle form of control, that allows you to manipulate the way others perceive you. You find yourself walking through the hallways of Versailles, adjusting your own invisible hat with careful precision. As you pass other courtiers, their eyes seem to linger on you longer than usual, as though they're trying to catch a glimpse of the secret you're hiding. You start to understand the power of the invisible hats, not just about hiding yourself. It's about making everyone around you wonder what you're hiding. The intrigue, the curiosity, it's all part of the allure. But the longer you immerse yourself in this world, the more you begin to question the true cost of wearing the invisible hat. As the courtiers grow more obsessed with their unseen accessories, you notice a growing emptiness behind their eyes. There's an underlying sense of competition, a constant pressure to maintain the illusion of power without ever revealing what's truly beneath the surface. It's as though the invisible hats are eroding the very essence of the people who wear them, turning them into mere shadows of their former selves. Still, you can't help but wonder, is this the true nature of power? The ability to control perception, to play the game without ever truly being seen. You find yourself reflecting on the strange, elusive appeal of the invisible hat. On one hand, it gives you a sense of control over how others see you, allowing you to project an air of authority, without ever fully revealing yourself, On the other hand, it also isolates you, making you a mystery to those around you and to yourself. What happens when you wear an invisible hat for so long that you forget what it feels like to be seen? As the court continues to spiral deeper into the world of invisible fashion, you begin to realize that the invisible hat is both a gift and a curse. It's a powerful tool, capable of elevating you to the highest echelons of Versailles society. But it's also a trap, one that can slowly consume you if you're not careful. The more you hide, the more you risk losing yourself in the process. The invisible hat may give you power, but it also demands that you surrender a part of your identity in exchange. You start to wonder whether anyone in the court truly knows who they are anymore. The invisible hats have created a world where nothing is as it seems, where appearances can be deceiving, and where the line between reality and illusion is blurred beyond recognition. The courtiers have become so obsessed with hiding their true selves that they've forgotten how to be anything other than what they project. They wear the invisible hats, not just to gain power, but to escape from the pressures of their own identities. And yet, even as the invisible hats take hold of Versailles, you can't help but wonder, will the allure of the unseen ever wear Will there come a time when the courtiers grow tired of hiding behind their invisible accessories? Or will they continue to play this game of perception and power until there's nothing left to reveal? The more you delve into this strange world, the more you begin to see the invisible hats for what they truly are. A constant reminder of the court's obsession with status and power. What started as a playful fashion statement has now morphed, cowned into something much more sinister. The courtiers no longer just wear their invisible hats as a symbol of wealth, they wear them as a tool to manipulate, to control, and to hide behind. The very idea of being invisible has become an obsession, and you find yourself wondering just how far this new world will go before it collapses under its own weight. You begin to notice a strange change in the behavior of those around you. The invisible hats, once a source of fascination, have now become a symbol of isolation. You can no longer tell who is truly powerful and who is simply pretending. The courtiers who wear the most extravagant invisible hats seem to be the most admired, but there's a hollow quality to their presence. They seem to float through the palace, disconnected from the world around them, like ghosts in an endless masquerade. And the ones who refuse to participate in this game, they are increasingly left behind, seen as out of touch, old-fashioned, and irrelevant. You start to question whether this invisible world of fashion is the true reality of Versailles, or if it's simply a temporary madness, a passing trend. But as you walk through the corridors of the palace, you realize that the trend is not passing, it's growing. The invisible hats are no longer confined to the aristocrats alone. Even the servants, those who once would have been invisible by virtue of their station, are beginning to wear their own versions of the trend. The invisible hats have permeated every layer of society, creating an ever-widening divide between those who wear the hats and those who don't. There's a strange irony in this. The invisible hats, which were once a mark of exclusivity, are now a way for even the lowest members of society to assert their place in the world. It's as if the very act of being invisible has allowed everyone to feel a part of something larger than themselves. A part of this bizarre new world of power, and prestige. You can't help but feel that the more the trend spreads, the more it begins to lose its meaning. What was once a symbol of the highest courtly fashion has now become an empty symbol of conformity. You overhear whispers in the halls of Versailles. Some say that the invisible hats are not just a trend, they're a statement about the nature of power itself. Power, they argue, isn't about being seen, it's about being untouchable. The invisible hats represent a kind of elite detachment from the everyday concerns of the world. The wearer becomes a figure of mystery, someone whose power is defined not by what they can show, but by what they choose to hide. This idea resonates with you. The invisible hat gives the wearer the ultimate advantage, the ability to control perception, to craft an identity that's not bound by the limitations of the visible world. As you walk through the gardens of Versailles, once more, you reflect on how this strange fashion has taken hold of you too. At first, you had dismissed the invisible hat as nothing more than a silly trend, a frivolous way for the court to entertain itself. But now, you see it differently. You've been swept up in this world of perception, and you begin to wonder if there's any way out. Can you ever truly escape the pull of the invisible world? or are you now trapped in it, just like everyone else? Historians still argue over the true significance of the invisible hats. Some believe they were a metaphor for the way the aristocracy, viewed themselves untouchable, above the fray of the common folk. Others argue that they were a desperate attempt to maintain control in a world where everything was becoming increasingly uncertain. But there's another theory that you can't shake, that the invisible hats were a reflection of the growing paranoia at court. In a place where power was always shifting, where loyalty could be bought and sold in the blink of an eye, the invisible hats represented a desire for security, for control over one's own identity. If you could wear a hat that no one could see, it meant you were in control of your own destiny. But as you continue to observe the courtiers, you realize that their power is not as solid as it seems. The invisible hats have created an atmosphere of suspicion and mistrust. No one can be sure of anyone else's true intentions. The court is full of people who are constantly pretending to be something they're not, hiding behind their invisible hats, wearing their facades so perfectly that no one can see the truth beneath. It's a delicate balance, and one that could collapse at any moment. The more you think about it, the more you realize that the invisible hats aren't just a reflection of the court's superficiality. They're a symptom of something much deeper. They represent the growing fear of exposure, of being seen for who you truly are. The invisible hats allow the courtiers to hide their flaws, their insecurities, their fears. But in doing so, they've also created a world where no one can trust anyone. The very thing that was supposed to bring them power, their invisibility, made them more vulnerable than ever before. You find yourself caught between two worlds, the world of the visible and the world of the invisible. In the Court of Versailles, it seems that visibility is both a blessing and a curse. To be seen is to be exposed, to reveal your true self to the scrutiny of others, but to be invisible, that's where the true power lies. The invisible hat has become a symbol of control, a way to maintain power in a world where perception is everything. And yet, in this pursuit of invisibility, the courtiers have lost something more important, the ability to truly be themselves. The more you immerse yourself in the world of Versailles, the deeper you fall into its complex web of power, perception, and deception. The invisible hats, once a curious oddity, have now evolved into something far more sinister. The courtiers who wear them have grown so entrenched in their invisible facades that they no longer seem like real people. Instead, they appear as empty vessels, their true identities buried beneath layers of invisible clothing, each trying to outdo the other in a game of status and secrecy. You've seen it in the way the courtiers interact with each other. There's a kind of unease in their eyes, as though no one trusts anyone else anymore. The invisible hats have become a barrier, not just between the courtiers and the rest of the world, but between the courtiers themselves. The more you watch, the more you realize that no one truly knows anyone at Versailles anymore. Everyone is playing a part, wearing their invisible hats like actors on a stage, constantly adjusting their personas to fit the ever-shifting expectations of the court. The palace itself, once a place of opulence and grandeur, now feels like a maze of mirrors. Every hallway, every ballroom, every garden is filled with courtiers who are hiding behind their invisible headwear, their faces unreadable, their true intentions hidden. You begin to wonder, are they hiding from the world, or are they hiding from themselves? The invisible hat, you realize, has become both a mask and a prison, trapping everyone in a world where appearances are everything, and truth is impossible to find. Historians still debate the true origins of the invisible hat cut. Some believe that it was a way for the courtiers to mock the excesses of the court, a satirical statement about the futility of outward displays of wealth. Others suggest that the trend was an attempt to find a deeper meaning in a world that had become increasingly superficial. But there's a third theory that strikes you as the most plausible, that the invisible hats were born out of a need for control. Court. In a court where power was always shifting, where loyalties were constantly in flux, the invisible hat gave the wearer the ultimate form of control over what others saw, and, more importantly, control over what they didn't see. But the longer you stay at Versailles, the more you begin to question whether the invisible hat truly gives its wearer power, or if it's just another illusion. The more the courtiers hide behind their invisible accessories, the more they seem to lose touch with their true selves. The court has become a place where no one knows who they are anymore, and no one can afford to reveal the truth. The invisible hats have created an environment of constant uncertainty, where every interaction is a delicate dance of veiled meanings and hidden agendas. You begin to realize that the invisible hat trend is not just a fashion statement, it's a reflection, of the larger forces at play in Versailles. The court is a place where power is constantly being negotiated, where the most dangerous game is the one that's played in the shadows. The invisible hat allows the wearer to manipulate others, to project an image of power and mystery without ever having to reveal their true nature. But the more the courtiers cling to their invisible headwear, the more they lose themselves in the process. They've become so obsessed with controlling how they are perceived that they've forgotten, too, who they really are. And yet, even as you begin to see the cracks in the invisible facade, you can't help but be drawn to the allure of the trend. The idea of being able to control how others see you, of being able to remain untouchable while still commanding attention, is intoxicating. You start to wonder if you, too, could pull off the invisible hat, if you could navigate this complex world of perception and power, where nothing is as it seems and everything is up for interpretation. But there's a danger in this world of invisible fashion, a danger that you can feel creeping in the back of your mind. The invisible hats may give you the power to hide, but they also make it harder to trust anyone. The more you wear the hat, the more you begin to wonder if anyone can be trusted, if anyone is truly genuine in this world of masks and facades. The invisible hat, you realize, is not just a tool for controlling others, it's also a way to hide from yourself, to bury your true self beneath layers of illusion. As you walk through the lavish halls of Versailles, you begin to notice something even more unsettling. The invisible hats have become more than just a symbol of power, they've become a symbol of fear. The courtiers are no longer just concerned with status or prestige. Now, they're terrified of being exposed, terrified of revealing their true selves. The invisible hats have become a shield against vulnerability, a way to protect themselves from the ever-present scrutiny of the court. But in doing so, they've trapped themselves in a world of false appearances, where no one is who they claim to be, and no one can be trusted. You start to feel the weight of this invisible world on your own shoulders. The more you observe the courtiers, the more you realize that their obsession with the invisible hats is not just a fashion trend, it's a manifestation of the fear that pervades every corner of Versailles. They are all hiding from something, whether it's their own insecurities, their ambitions, or the ever-present fear of being exposed. The more they wear their invisible hats, the more they become disconnected from the world around them, from the very people they seek to control. And so, the invisible hats remain, hanging in the air like a constant reminder of the fragility of power. You can't help but wonder, will they ever be discarded, or will they continue to dominate the Court of Versailles, creating a world where nothing is as it seems and everything is just an illusion? As the invisible hats continue their reign over Versailles, the palace itself becomes more and more suffocating. The walls, once vibrant with life, seem to close in as you walk through the halls, and the courtiers, draped in their invisible accessories, appear to float through the rooms like ghosts. Each one is a phantom, hiding behind their veils of illusion, their identities blurred, their intentions hidden from view. It's as though the entire court is trapped in a web of their own making, caught in the game of appearances, constantly vying for power, yet unable to see one another clearly. Everywhere you look, there's a sense of unease. The invisible hats have created an atmosphere of paranoia, where every glance, every word, feels loaded with hidden meanings. The courtiers are no longer just concerned with displaying wealth or status, they are obsessed with maintaining the illusion of power. Their invisible headwear has become not just a fashion accessory, but a symbol of their deepest fear. The fear of being exposed. You begin to notice how the invisible hats affect the way people interact. Conversations that once might have been full of laughter and camaraderie are now filled with cautious, measured words, as if every statement is carefully calculated to avoid revealing too much. The invisible hats have created a society of half-truths, where no one is truly honest, and no one can afford to be vulnerable. The power of the invisible hat lies in its ability to control perception, how others see you, how you see yourself, and how you manipulate both. Historians have long argued about the true purpose of the invisible hat, but you're beginning to see it more clearly now. It wasn't just a passing fad, it was a symbol of the court's deeper issues. The invisible hats were a response to the uncertainty that pervaded Versailles. The constant power struggles, the shifting alliances, the ever-present threat of betrayal were the forces that shaped the invisible trend. The courtiers, in their desire to maintain their positions of power, turned to invisibility as a means of survival. The more elusive they could be, the safer they would feel. As you move through the court, you begin to realize that the invisible hats are not just about hiding yourself from others. They are also a way of hiding from yourself. You've noticed the change in the courtiers over time. They no longer seem like the vibrant, ambitious people they once were. Instead, they appear drained, their energy sapped by the constant pressure to maintain their facades. The invisible hats have taken a toll on them, stripping away their authenticity and leaving only hollow shells in their place. But you are also beginning to feel the effects of this world yourself. The more you observe, the more you start to question your own place in this strange court. At first, it seemed harmless, a curiosity, a trend that would soon pass. But now, you can see the full extent of its grip on Versailles. It's not just a fashion, it's a way of life, one that demands constant performance, constant vigilance. And the more you wear the invisible hat, the more you wonder if you've become just another player in this game. Lost in the pursuit of power and prestige, you overhear murmurs in the corridors of Versailles. There are whispers of a growing unrest among the courtiers, those who are beginning to see the invisible hats for what they truly are, a trap. Some of the older, more seasoned members of the court are starting to speak out against the trend, arguing that it has gone too far, that it has eroded the very foundation of Versailles society. There's talk of rebellion, of a return to the days when the court was more open, more genuine. But as the whispers grow louder, you can't help but wonder, are the invisible hats truly the cause of all this discontent, or are they just a symptom of something much deeper? Historians remain divided on the legacy of the invisible hats. Some argue that they were a clever commentary on the artificiality of power, a way for the courtiers to mock the very system they upheld. Others see them as a tragic symbol of Versailles' downfall, or reflection of the court's inability to confront its own vulnerabilities. The truth, it seems, lies somewhere in between. The invisible hats may have been born out of a desire for control, but they also represent the court's desperate attempt to shield itself from the chaos that lurked just beneath the surface. You begin to wonder if the invisible hats were ever truly about power at all, or if they were simply a way for the courtiers to escape their own insecurities. The more you watch, the courtiers adjust their invisible headwear, the more you see how the hats have become a crutch, a way for them to avoid confronting their own weaknesses. They hide behind the hats, hoping to be seen as something they are not, to project an image of strength and confidence while concealing their fears and doubts. As the days go on, you begin to feel the weight of this world pressing down on you. The invisible hats have created a world where everyone is afraid to be real, where authenticity is a weakness and illusion is strength. But you can't help but wonder what would happen if someone were to take off their invisible hat. What would it mean to stop hiding, to let go of the game, to be seen for who you truly are? Could such a person survive in the cutthroat world of Versailles, or would they be cast aside, forgotten, lost in the shadows? The invisible hats have created a society built on secrecy, on the art of illusion, but you begin to feel that it is only a matter of time before the whole thing collapses. The courtiers are already beginning to crack under the pressure, and you can see that the cracks are spreading. What was once a symbol of power is now becoming a symbol of weakness, as the invisible hats have revealed the frailty of those who wear them. The Court of Versailles, it seems, is not as untouchable as it once appeared. You take a deep breath, the weight of the invisible world heavy on your chest. It seems that the longer the invisible hats remain, the more they erode the very fabric of Versailles itself. The question now is, can anyone truly escape the grasp of the invisible hats, or are they doomed to live in this world of illusion forever? The walls of Versailles seem to close in tighter with every passing day. The once grandiose hallways now feel like they're filled with echoes of lost power. The soft whisper of footsteps following you in every direction. The invisible hats have taken root so deeply in the court's fabric that it feels as though no one knows who they really are anymore, not even themselves. Everyone is caught in this endless cycle of illusion, wearing their invisible headwear like a mask they can't take off. Even when the weight of it grows unbearable, you begin to notice that something has shifted in the atmosphere. There's a growing sense of discomfort among the courtiers on unease that can't be ignored. The invisible hats, once a symbol of distinction, have begun to feel more like chains. The courtiers adjust them constantly, tugging at the air above their heads, as if trying to hold on to their grip on power. But the more they adjust, the more you see the strain in their faces, their eyes hollow, their expressions distant, as though the act of maintaining the illusion is slowly draining them. In this world of half-truths and facades, there's no room for authenticity. The courtiers, who once flourished in the luxury of their wealth and position, have now become prisoners of their own making. Each invisible hat is a reminder that, the more you try to control how you are seen, the more you lose yourself. You've watched this transformation in the faces of the courtiers, the way they no longer talk openly, the way their eyes dart nervously when they think no one is watching. They wear their invisible hats, not just as symbols of their status, but as a desperate attempt to hold on to anything that might keep them from fading into nothingness. You wonder if there's any way out of this cycle. Can anyone escape this invisible world, where the most powerful are those who manage to conceal their true selves the best? Is there even a way to reclaim the authenticity that has been lost? In this pursuit of illusion, historians still argue about the origins of the invisible hats. Some see them as a tool to establish dominance in a world where appearances are everything. Others believe the invisible hats were a cry for help, a desperate attempt to hide the inner turmoil and insecurity that plagued the courtiers. But in your eyes, it's clear that the invisible hats have become something far more dangerous. They are a mirror of the court itself, place where the most powerful are those who can conceal their fears and insecurities, who can project an image of strength without ever showing what lies beneath. And yet, as the days wear on, you begin to realize that the invisible hats have created a world where the real power lies in hiding. The courtiers are no longer fighting for control of the kingdom or the throne. They're fighting for the power to remain unseen, to hide their true selves from the prying eyes of the court. The more they hide, the more they become entangled in their own webs of deceit. The invisible hats, you come to understand, are not just symbols of power. They are a symbol of Versailles itself, a place where nothing is as it seems, where the true nature of things is buried beneath layers of illusion. The court is like a stage, and everyone is playing a role, wearing their invisible hats as props in a performance that no one can break free from. But as you walk through the halls of Versailles, you begin to wonder if anyone, anywhere, can truly escape this world of invisible fashion. Can someone walk away from the game, leave behind the need for power, and simply be? Or is the pursuit of invisibility too deeply ingrained in the court's psyche to ever allow for such a thing? You think back to the early days of your time in Versailles, excitement, the curiosity about the invisible hats, the sense of being part of something unique. Cat. At that time, you were just like the others, eager to fit in, to wear the invisible hat and be part of the world of power and prestige. But now, as you look around, you see that the invisible hats have not brought freedom. They have brought entrapment. The more you wear your invisible hat, the more you become a part of this strange, suffocating system. The more you try to blend in, to be seen and accepted, the more you lose yourself in the process. You begin to wonder if the invisible hats were ever about power at all, or if they were simply a symptom of a much deeper fear. The courtiers are not just hiding their identities, they are hiding their fears, their vulnerabilities, their darkest secrets. The invisible hats are their armor, their way of protecting themselves from the world, from the truth of who they really are. But in the end, you realize that the more they hide, the more they become lost in their own illusions. A strange sense of clarity washes over you as you walk through the gardens of Versailles. You've seen enough. You've felt the weight of Kant, the invisible world, on your shoulders, and you know now that there is no escaping it. The invisible hats are not just a passing trend, they are a reflection of the very nature of power, of the human need to control how we are seen, to mask our vulnerabilities in order to protect ourselves. But the more we try to control, the more we lose. The more we hide, the more we become lost. The invisible hats, once a symbol of grandeur and power, have now become a haunting reminder of what can happen when we let fear dictate our actions. The courtiers of Versailles, so caught up in their need to be seen in a certain light, have forgotten what it means to truly be themselves. The invisible hats have become their chains, and you wonder, will they ever be able to take them off? As time stretches on in the Court of Versailles, the air grows thick with tension. The once beautiful palace, the seat of grandeur and elegance, now seems to echo with an almost suffocating silence. The invisible hats, once the height of fashion, have become a symbol of the court's collective inability to escape the cycle of illusion and fear. What was once a playful quirk, a strange fashion trend, is now a way of life, a life defined by the need to hide, to protect oneself from the ever-present scrutiny that comes with being seen. You begin to notice more than just the change in the courtiers. The very nature of Versailles seems to have shifted. The once vibrant social gatherings are now strained. The laughter that used to echo through the grand halls, now replaced with awkward silences and cautious glances. The invisible hats, which were once a source of pride, are now a burden that everyone carries. People adjust them nervously, as if they are tethered to them, their fingers constantly tracing the invisible outlines of their power. But, in doing so, they're only tightening the chains that bind them. In the midst of this, you can't help but feel a strange sense of displacement. You've walked the halls of Versailles long enough to understand the subtle nuances of the invisible hats. They've come to define the courtiers' every action, every word, every decision. You realize now that the invisible hats have completely overtaken the court. They aren't just symbols of power, they've become the very foundation of how everyone interacts. Without the invisible hats, it's as if the courtiers would cease to exist, their identities erased, their worth determined by how well they play the game of perception. You wonder whether there is any hope for the court. or if this obsession with invisibility will continue until it consumes everyone. The idea of authenticity has long been forgotten. Quote, everyone is so focused on maintaining their carefully constructed facades that they've lost touch with who they really are. The invisible hats have created a world where nothing is genuine, where every interaction is carefully orchestrated to maintain the illusion of power. Historians have often commented on the culture of Versailles, but they've overlooked the most important element, the fear. It's not just the fear of being seen or being exposed. It's the fear of being nothing. The invisible hats are a manifestation of that fear. By wearing them, the courtiers attempt to project an image of strength and control, but in reality, they are hiding from the very essence of their humanity. They are trying to shield themselves from vulnerability, from the possibility of being exposed as weak or flawed. But in doing so, they've created a world where no one can be truly seen. The more you observe, the more you begin to realize that the invisible hats are a metaphor for the court itself, a place where appearances are everything, but nothing is as it seems. In the pursuit of power, the courtiers have lost themselves. The masks they wear are no longer just a way of projecting strengths. They are a way of hiding from their own weaknesses, from their own humanity. And then it hits you. This is what the invisible hats represent. They aren't just accessories, Tet. They are a manifestation of the deep-seated insecurity that runs through the veins of Versailles. The courtiers are not concerned with being powerful, they are concerned with being seen as powerful. See, the line between reality and illusion has blurred so much that the courtiers have forgotten what it means to be truly seen for who they are. But even as this realization settles in, you start to feel the allure of the invisible hats once again. The idea of being able to hide from the world, to control how others perceive you, is still tempting. It's an intoxicating power, the ability to manipulate your image, to make yourself seem untouchable, invincible. You wonder if the courtiers feel that same pull, the desire to maintain the illusion, to wear their invisible hats as a way of shielding themselves from the harshness of reality. But at what cost? As you watch the courtiers continue their endless dance of illusion, you can't help but feel a sense of sadness. What once started as a playful trend has now become an inescapable trap. The invisible hats, which were once symbols of elegance and mystery, have now come to represent the very thing that has destroyed the essence of Versailles, the inability to be real, to be vulnerable, to be human. In this world of invisible hats, power is not determined by what you can show, it's determined by what you can hide. The courtiers, who can mask their true selves the best, are the ones who rise to the top. But as you walk through the halls of Versailles, you begin to wonder, what happens when the desire to hide becomes stronger than the desire to be seen? Will the invisible hats continue to rule the court, or will they eventually unravel, revealing the emptiness beneath? The longer you stay, the more you realize that the invisible hats are not just a trend, but a reflection of the deeper truths about Versailles. They represent the need for control, the fear of exposure, the constant struggle to maintain an image, power. But in the end, you begin to question if anyone at Versailles has truly been seen at all, and so the invisible hats remain, a symbol of a court trapped in its own illusions, a court where no one knows who they really are, and perhaps no one ever will. As The invisible hats continue their silent reign over the Court of Versailles. You begin to feel a shift in the energy around you. What was once a thrilling dance of intrigue and subtle manipulation is now becoming suffocating, draining the life from every corner of the palace. The courtiers, once the epitome of elegance and grandeur, now appear like shadows, their identities obscured beneath layers of invisible fabric. The invisible hats, which once represented a mysterious allure, have transformed into symbols of the court's collective fear and insecurity. And it's clear that no one, not even you, is immune to their influence. You find yourself looking at the courtiers differently now. The way they move, the way they speak, it's all calculated. Their interactions are no longer organic, but mechanical, as if each person is playing a role in a script they can no longer remember. The invisible hats have stripped them of their authenticity, replacing it with a hollow performance. The more you observe, the more you begin to understand the true cost of wearing such a hat. It's not just about power or prestige. It's about the relentless pressure to maintain an image, to never let the world see the cracks in your facade. As the days pass, you feel a growing sense of alienation. The invisible hats are not just a physical accessory. They are a psychological prison. Every courtier seems trapped in the same cycle, adjusting and readjusting their invisible headgear, constantly checking to make sure it's still in place. But despite all their efforts, it's clear that no one can truly control how they are seen, not even the most powerful among them. The invisible hats may have granted the courtiers the illusion of control, but in reality, they've only heightened their vulnerability. You've started to wonder, is it possible to break free from this cycle? Can anyone, at Versailles or anywhere, ever truly escape the grasp of the invisible hat? You've heard whispers from some of the older courtiers, those who have seen trends come and go, suggesting that the invisible hats will eventually fade, just like all other fashion trends. But there's something different about this one, something that makes it feel more like an idea than a mere accessory. The invisible hats are not just clothing. They represent the way the court, and perhaps society at large, has come to view power and status as you walk through the palace. You see the courtiers adjusting their invisible hats once more, a gesture that has become as habitual as breathing. They do it without thinking, without even noticing how much it controls their every movement. It's almost as if they've forgotten what it means to be without it, to walk freely in the world, unburdened by the weight of performance. You can feel the pressure in the air, the sense that everyone is playing a game they no longer understand, but can't escape. The invisible hats have created a world where no one knows who they are beneath the surface. The invisible hats, you realize, are a reflection of the court itself, a place built on illusions, on facades, on the constant effort to project an image of power and perfection. The courtiers have forgotten what it means to simply be, to exist without the need for validation or approval. They have become slaves to the invisible hats, trapped in a world of perpetual performance, where every action is calculated and every word is carefully measured. And the worst part, no one can escape it. But as you continue your journey through the halls of Versailles, you start to see cracks in the illusion. You see courtiers who no longer bother to adjust their invisible hats, who walk with their heads held high, as if daring the world to see them for who they truly are. For the first time in a long while, you sense a glimmer of authenticity and care. Their movements a flicker of something real beneath the carefully constructed layers of invisibility. Perhaps the invisible hats, like all trends, will eventually burn themselves out. Perhaps, like the courtiers who wear them, the trend will begin to lose its hold over them, as they tire of the constant game of performance. Yet, there is also something deeply unsettling about this newfound authenticity. For so long, the invisible hats have served as a shield, a barrier between the courtiers and the rest of the world. Without them, who are they really? Will they be able to stand in the light of day, unafraid of being seen for who they truly are, or will the pressure of that exposure be too great? Historians still debate the legacy of the invisible hats. Some suggest that they were an expression of Versailles' obsession with appearance, a reflection of the court's desire to control how they were perceived by others. Others see them as a manifestation of fear, the fear of being vulnerable, the fear of being exposed as less than perfect. But as you look around, you see that they have become something far more insidious, a symbol of the court's collective inability to be real, to be human. The invisible hats have stripped the courtiers of their authenticity, leaving them empty and hollow, unable to connect with one another on a deeper level. You can't help but feel a sense of sadness as you walk through the palace, watching the courtiers adjust their invisible hats over and over again. There is no joy in their movements anymore, no excitement in their steps. The invisible hats, once symbols of mystery and power, have become shackles that bind them to a world of illusion, and the longer they wear them, the more they lose themselves in the process. But amidst this disillusionment, there's still a flicker of hope. Perhaps, one day, someone will have the courage to step out of the shadows, to shed the invisible hat and reveal themselves for who they truly are. It may take time, but you believe that it's possible. For now, though, the invisible hats remain, a constant reminder of the fragility of power, and the price of living a life defined by illusion. As the invisible hats continue to dominate the social landscape of Versailles, you begin to feel an overwhelming sense of exhaustion. What was once an alluring mystery has now become an ever-present weight on everyone in the court. The palace itself, once a place of splendor and grandeur, now feels like a labyrinth of mirrors, reflecting distorted versions of the courtiers' true selves. They adjust their invisible hats in subtle, almost unconscious movements, their faces growing increasingly hollow with each passing day. It's as if the very act of wearing the invisible hat has drained them of something essential, leaving only shadows behind. You start to wonder, can anyone break free from this cycle? The more you observe, the more you realize that the invisible hats have transformed Versailles into a place where authenticity is no longer valued. The courtiers are obsessed with maintaining their carefully constructed facades, too afraid to show even the slightest crack in their armor. They fear that to be vulnerable, to be seen as they truly are, would be to lose their place in the ever-shifting hierarchy of power. So, they cling to their invisible hats like lifelines, believing that by hiding their true selves, they can protect themselves from the harsh realities of the court. Yet, you can sense that the courtiers are growing weary. There is a quiet desperation in their movements now, a sense that they are trapped in a performance they can no longer sustain. The invisible hats, which once granted them the illusion of power, have become a prison from which they can't escape. The more they hide behind their facades, the more they lose touch with their own humanity. You can see it in their eyes. There is a deep, unspoken longing for something real, something tangible. But in the world of invisible hats, realness is a luxury few can afford. As you move through the gardens of Versailles, you notice that the once thriving social interactions have all but disappeared. The courtiers no longer engage in lively conversation or debate. Instead, they walk through the gardens in silence, their heads held high, their invisible hats the only thing that seems to define them. The world around them has faded into the background, and they are left alone with their invisible masks. You realize that they are no longer able to connect with one another on a deeper level. They are so consumed with maintaining the illusion of power and control that they have forgotten how to truly be with each other. The invisible hats have created a divide, not just between the courtiers and the rest of the world, but between the courtiers themselves. In the midst of this isolation, a thought begins to form in your mind. What would happen if someone were to remove their invisible hat? What if one person, just one, dared to step into the light and reveal themselves, unmasked and unashamed? Could they survive in a world so defined by illusion, or would they be cast aside, forgotten, and ignored? Like so many before them, the invisible hats have created a world where only the most skilled at deception rise to the top, where vulnerability is seen as weakness and authenticity is a dangerous, fragile thing. You can't help but wonder if the invisible hats have stripped the court of its soul, leaving only the cold, empty shells of the people who wear them. And yet, as you look around, you see the faintest glimmer of change. Some of the courtiers, those who have grown weary of the endless charade, begin to question the value of their invisible hats. It's a quiet rebellion, but it's their unspoken desire to break free from the suffocating grip of illusion. You notice that some of them no longer adjust their invisible headgear so frequently. They walk with their heads slightly lower, as though daring to be seen for who they truly are. It's a small shift, but you can feel the tension in the air. Perhaps, just perhaps, the invisible hats are beginning to lose their power. Historians still argue about the significance of the invisible hats. Some believe that they were a clever commentary on the excesses of the court, a satire of the aristocracy's obsession with appearance. Others see them as a tragic symbol of the court's downfall, a reflection of the emptiness that lies at the heart of power and illusion. But as you stand in the gardens of Versailles, watching the courtiers move silently through the rows of manicured flowers, you realize that the invisible hats have become something more profound than any of these interpretations. They are a symbol of the court's inability to face its own humanity, its own vulnerability. They are a shield against the world, but in the end, they have only created more distance between the courtiers and the truth. But even as the invisible hats continue to cast their shadow over Versailles, you begin to sense that change is in the air. It's subtle, but it's there. The courtiers are beginning to question the cost of maintaining the illusion, the price of living a life defined by power and control. The invisible hats have served their purpose, but now they seem to be slowly losing their grip. Perhaps, after all, the truth will come to light. You continue your walk through the gardens, your mind racing with the possibilities. The invisible hats, so long the symbol of the court's grandeur, may finally be starting to lose their power. The courtiers, tired of the constant performance, are beginning to seek something more real, and perhaps, in time, they will learn that the true power lies not in hiding behind a mask, but in the courage to be seen as you truly are. Asterisk. Days continue to pass in Versailles, and a subtle change seems to ripple through the court, though it's hardly noticeable at first. The invisible hats, which once reigned supreme, are starting to feel like relics of an old world, a world that no longer holds the same appeal. The courtiers, once so fixated on their hidden displays of power, are beginning to question what it really means to be in control. Some of them are even starting to remove their invisible hats in small, quiet acts of defiance. The change is gradual, but you can feel it in the era shift. Delicate and uncertain, like the first signs of spring after a long winter, you begin to wonder if this quiet rebellion will lead to something larger. Will the courtiers continue to wear their invisible hats, or will they eventually cast them aside entirely, reclaiming their authenticity in the process? It's hard to say, but there is a definite sense of unease growing among them. The once immovable pillars of Versailles power, those who wore their invisible hats with unshakable confidence, are starting to look more fragile, more human. The illusion of invincibility is starting to crack. The more you observe, the more you understand that the invisible hats were never just about power. They were about control, about the desire to shape how the world saw you. The Court of Versailles had become a place where appearances were everything, where no one could afford to show weakness. But now, the more the courtiers begin to step away from their invisible hats, the more they start to confront the truths they have long been hiding from. And in doing so, they are reclaiming a part of themselves they had long forgotten, the part of them that was real, raw, and vulnerable. As you walk through the halls of Versailles once more, the oppressive atmosphere seems to lift ever so slightly. The courtiers no longer move with the same mechanical precision, their invisible hats held high and perfect. Some of them seem more relaxed, as though they are breathing for the first time in ages. It's as if the invisible hats no longer hold the same power over them, no longer control every aspect of their lives. There is a tentative freedom in their movements, a softening of the facade they've so carefully constructed. Still, the process is slow. Some courtiers cling tightly to their invisible hats, afraid to let go, afraid to be exposed for who they truly are. They've spent so long hiding behind their facades that they can't imagine a world where they don't have to wear them. But you can tell that for every courtier who hesitates, there are more who are willing to take a step forward. The change is coming, and though it may not be immediate or dramatic, it is real. It's as if a collective awareness is starting to dawn across Versailles, awareness that the invisible hats, while once symbols of power, have become shackles, chains that bind them to a life of illusion and fear. You overhear a conversation in one of the ornate rooms, where a group of courtiers is quietly discussing the growing discontent with the invisible hats. There's talk of returning to a more open and honest way of life, of shedding the masks they've worn for so long. Some argue that the invisible hats were never meant to be a permanent solution, that they were merely a trend that had outlasted its purpose. Others, more hesitant, wonder what will happen if the court loses its allure, if the power of the invisible hats disappears entirely. Will they still be relevant? Will they still hold their place in the world? You realize that the invisible hats, though once powerful, are now starting to reveal their true nature. They are fragile. The more the courtiers cling to them, the more they risk losing themselves in the process. The illusion of power is nothing without the substance to back it up. The invisible hats may have provided protection, but in the end, they are no more than a veil, a mask that only hides the truth. And now, the courtiers are faced with a choice: to continue hiding behind the invisible hats, or to face the world as they truly are. As the conversation winds down, you catch a glimpse of one of the older courtiers, a figure who has long held power at the heart of Versailles. For the first time, you see a slight shift in their posture, small, almost imperceptible lowering of their head. Their invisible hat, once the pinnacle of their grandeur, is now positioned slightly askew. It's not a dramatic gesture, but it is one that speaks volumes. It is a sign of vulnerability, a crack in the armor. For a moment, you wonder if this is the beginning of something bigger, a turning point where the invisible hats are no longer the defining feature of Versailles, where authenticity and transparency might once again take center stage. It seems unlikely, of course. The court is a place built on performance, on maintaining appearances. But there is a glimmer of hope now, something that had been missing for so long. Perhaps, after all, the invisible hats will be discarded in time, and Versailles will learn to exist without them, perhaps even thrive. The journey toward that freedom will be long and filled with uncertainty. But you feel something in the air that suggests it is possible. A subtle but undeniable shift has begun. The invisible hats, which once seemed invincible, have started to lose their grip on the court. And with that, the possibility of a new chapter begins to unfold, one where the courtiers of Versailles can walk without the burden of their illusions, where they might finally be able to reclaim their true selves. The days that follow bring with them a new sense of anticipation, a strange mixture of uncertainty and hope. The once stifling air of Versailles has begun to lift, albeit gently, as courtiers slowly, cautiously, begin to question the power of their invisible hats. It's as though, for the first time in ages, they are beginning to see the true cost of maintaining their illusions. The invisible hats, which once held such power over them, are now starting to feel like relics of a past. They no longer want to be bound to But there's something else in the air, something that tells you the process of change, as slow as it may be, is inevitable. The palace itself, which has long served as a fortress of perfection and control, now feels different. You walk through the grand halls and notice how the courtiers move with a little less tension, their invisible hats not so perfectly adjusted. Some wear their headgear with a slight tilt, others seem to wear it more loosely, while a few have even discarded it entirely. Their faces are softer now, less guarded. The once constant chatter of careful words and delicate maneuvers has turned into quieter, more genuine conversations. There is a hesitant, but real, shift happening. And you begin to realize that the invisible hats, once the embodiment of power and status, are now symbols of the past. As you wander through the gardens once more, you overhear fragments of conversation about authenticity, about shedding the need for perfection, about reclaiming one's self. It's almost like a rebellion, but a quiet one where the courtiers are no longer sure of what they have been fighting for. The invisible hats, which have defined their every move for so long, are now beginning to lose their grip on them. But even as you witness this change, you can feel the undercurrent of fear still present. To take off the invisible hat completely, to show your true self, is a risk that many are still unwilling to take. After all, it has been the symbol of power for so long, and who are they without it? Despite this hesitation, you see that more and more courtiers are starting to act differently. They no longer walk with the same air of invincibility. There's a vulnerability in their movements, an openness that wasn't there before. And though the invisible hats are still present in many cases, they no longer seem as crucial to the courtier's sense of self. For the first time in years, there's a feeling that perhaps the Court of Versailles can exist without them, that it can return to its roots as a place of expression, of culture, of thought, rather than just a stage for performance. You can't help but feel that something profound is unfolding before your eyes. The invisible hats, once the ultimate symbols of control, are beginning to be seen for what they are: empty symbols. The courtiers have lived their lives believing that hiding behind them was the key to power. But now, it's becoming clear that true power lies not in invisibility, but in the courage to stand in full view of the world, to face it without the layers of masks and facades. But there are still those who remain hesitant, clinging to their invisible hats as if their very existence depends on them. You see it in their eyes, the fear, the anxiety of stepping into the light without the protection of their carefully constructed illusions. The Court of Versailles has built its entire existence around these invisible accessories, and to remove them feels like an existential threat to their identity, to everything they have fought for. Yet even in their reluctance, there's a quiet sense that they know it's time to let go. In the midst of this shift, you find yourself reflecting on your own place in this strange world. You have watched as the invisible hats have come to define the courtiers, and you've seen the toll they've taken on them. What was once a symbol of status and power has now become a symbol of fear, of hiding from one's true self. The more you think about it, the more you realize that the invisible hats have never been about true power. They were a way to create distance, to protect oneself from vulnerability. But in doing so, they've also prevented the courtiers from forming real connections with each other. They've kept them isolated, trapped in a world of empty performances. And yet, despite all the pain and struggle, you can see the glimmer of a new beginning. The invisible hats are beginning to lose their hold, and the courtiers are slowly learning that they can live without them. There's a subtle freedom in the air now, a sense that perhaps Versailles can return to its true purpose, to be a place of culture, of art, of genuine human connection. And though it may take time, you can't help but feel that this shift is inevitable. There are still challenges ahead. Court is not an easy place to change, and the invisible hats have been deeply ingrained in the lives of the courtiers. The fear of exposure, of being seen without their layers of protection, still lingers. But the more they begin to question the purpose of their invisible hats, the more they realize that the true danger lies in continuing to hide behind them. The court has been living in a world of illusion for far too long, and the time has come to face reality, to let go of the masks and the facades, and to embrace who they truly are. You begin to realize that, perhaps, the invisible hats were never just about fashion or power. They were a symptom of a deeper fear, a fear that runs through every corner of the court. A fear of being vulnerable, of being exposed for who you really are. Courtiers slowly begin to shed their invisible hats. You sense a movement toward honesty, toward authenticity. The journey will be slow, but it's beginning. And though the court may never be the same, perhaps that's not such a bad thing after all. The time has finally come for Versailles to confront its own truths. The invisible hats, once worn as shields against the world, are now relics of a past era defined by the constant struggle to maintain control over appearances. Courtiers, who once moved through the palace like ghosts in an endless masquerade, are now beginning to shed their illusions. There is a softness in their eyes, a vulnerability that was once absent, and it is clear that they are no longer the same people they were when they first donned their invisible hats. As you walk through the once opulent halls, you can feel the shift all around you. The court is quieter now, no longer filled with the constant hum of carefully measured conversations. There's a peacefulness, almost a serenity, in the air. The courtiers are still adjusting to their newfound authenticity, still learning to navigate a world where they don't have to hide behind masks of power. But there's no turning back now. The invisible hats have lost their hold on them, and in their place, something new is emerging, a more genuine, more human way of being. You pass by a group of courtiers, no longer the aloof, distant figures they once were. They are talking openly, laughing even, without the ever-present pressure to maintain their carefully crafted facades. There is an ease to their movements now, as though they are finally able to breathe after years of suffocating under the weight of their own illusions. The invisible hats have fallen away, and with them, the false sense of power that came with them. But even as you witness this quiet revolution, you can't help but wonder what the future holds for Versailles. The invisible hats were never just about fashion. They were a symbol of the court's entire way of life, life built on performance, on the manipulation of perception. To remove the invisible hats is to confront not just the superficial layers of power, but the deeper structures that have long defined the court. The courtiers are now faced with a choice: to continue in the direction they've been going, or to embrace a new way of life, one where authenticity, vulnerability, and connection are at the center. As the courtiers begin to embrace this new reality, you realize that the Court of Versailles is no longer just a place of politics and power struggles. It has become something different, something more human. There are no longer whispers about who's wearing the most extravagant invisible hat, or who's managed to hide their true self the most effectively. Instead, there are conversations about art, culture, and shared experiences. There is laughter, real laughter, not the forced kind that was once so common in the halls of the palace. For the first time, the courtiers are beginning to see each other as people, not just as figures in a game of status and manipulation. and you realize, as you observe the scene unfold, that this is what Versailles was always meant to be, a place where the arts flourished, where ideas could be shared freely, and where people could come together not through masks of power, but through their shared humanity. The invisible hats, though once a symbol of grandeur, have only served to keep the courtiers apart, to isolate them from each other and from themselves. But now, as they slowly let go of their need for invisibility, they are starting to come together in a way that feels more genuine and real than anything that came before. You can see the change most clearly in the eyes of the courtiers. Where once there was suspicion, there is now understanding. Where there was fear, there is now trust. The invisible hats, which once kept them hidden from one another, have now been replaced by something far more valuable: connection. For the first time, they are beginning to see each other for who they truly are, without the barriers of illusion and pretense. As you stand at the center of the palace, watching the courtiers interact with each other in a way that feels both new and familiar, you realize that this moment is a turning point. Versailles is changing, not just in the way its courtiers dress, but in the way they live and interact with one another. The invisible hats, once the hallmark of power and status, are fading into the background, and in their place, something far more powerful is emerging: authenticity, vulnerability, and a sense of shared purpose. The journey is far from over. There will be struggles, of course. Change is never easy. And there are those who will resist this new reality, who will cling to their invisible hats as a way to protect themselves from the discomfort of being truly seen. But for the first time, there is hope that Versailles can move beyond its past, beyond the need for masks and performances, and embrace something more real. As the courtiers continue to gather, laughing and talking openly, you begin to feel a deep sense of peace. The invisible hats may have ruled Versailles for so long, but their reign is over. A new era is dawning, one where the courtiers of Versailles can finally be themselves, where they can embrace their true selves without fear of judgment or rejection. And as you watch the scene unfold, you realize that this is the beginning of something beautiful. The invisible hats, once symbols of grandeur and fear, have been replaced by something much more powerful: the freedom to be seen, to be known, and to be accepted for who you truly are. Now, in the quiet of the palace, you can hear the faint sound of laughter, a sound that has been absent for far too long. And you know, deep down, that this is just the beginning of a new chapter for Versailles. A chapter where the courtiers no longer hide behind invisible hats, but stand tall in the light, proud of who they are, unafraid to be seen. Asterisk.